Now, Stephen, Christina, and Marisela, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you for that introduction. It's a pleasure to be working with the World Affairs Council Town Hall on this very important event. And we don't have a lot of time for this session. We're going to get right into it. I'm delighted today to be joined by two experts in international trade, as Los Angeles is one of the most important trade centers in the entire nation, if not the entire world, with Los Angeles County as one of the largest economies in the United States. And as we're facing this important global crisis, we're seeing more and more the interdependence of international trade and how that affects not only the world, but this entire region as a whole. So today we have quite a few questions we want to go over and really talk about and understand what's happening around the world, especially what's happening in Los Angeles. So again, today we're joined by Christine Peterson, the Director for Trade and Investment at Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti's Office of International Affairs, as well as Marisela Carabello, Director of Trade Development at the Port of Los Angeles. Christine has years of experience working previously at the U.S. Trade Representative's Office, the U.S. Department of Commerce, as well as the U.S. Interior. So we're going to start with Christine to basically get a short overview in terms of what you're seeing around Los Angeles and the impact around the world, and maybe a bit of the history behind it as well. Christine?
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for having me to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and Town Hall. To World Trade Center LA, and of course thanks to my co-panelist Marisela. To everyone who is joining remotely, I want to say thank you for your cooperation with the Safer at Home order and activities like this that really embrace the virtual means of connecting and informing one another of developments, and our needs are really important. So thank you so much for doing your part. I know it's not easy for people that are on the line or joining that have come forward with donations, offers of assistance, leads on supplies, including and especially our international community and consular corps. I want to thank you for that as well. There are 3 points that I'd like to discuss during our time today. I'll just give a quick overview of them. One is to share what the city is doing, how the city is looking at this public health crisis and the measures that we've taken, and to invite your input. I'd also like to give a little bit of perspective on the intersection of trade policy and pandemics, and then also encourage continued international coordination and collaboration like you're doing right now today. So first, what the city is doing. First and foremost, we're treating the COVID-19 outbreak as a public health crisis. So we're treating it as a public, by that I mean, we are dealing with the economic impacts or consequences as a result of the public health crisis. So as opposed to the 2018 Great Recession, that was an economic crisis. This is a public health crisis that has economic effects. So the focus is really on testing sites, resources. We just launched a new health worker portal for people to sign up and if they're not working. We're focusing on the most vulnerable. So that means our unhoused populations, immigrant, undocumented populations, and seniors or homebound who need food delivery and extra resources. We also are rolling out resources for small businesses. So there's an $11 million fund for microloans for small businesses in Los Angeles, as well as an eviction on commercial, a moratorium on commercial evictions. And of course, we're rolling out all of these efforts in real time, all the information in real time. So always go to coronavirus.lacity.org. The mayor is also giving daily press briefings that you can find on that website after they've concluded, or you can watch live on his Facebook page. So going to the perspective on the trade policy of pandemics, the biggest point I want to make is that protectionism is not the answer. So at all stages, I think there are 3 main inflection points when it comes to trade policy and pandemics. One is the preparedness. so in advance of an outbreak. The second is during an outbreak, what trade policy measures are taken. And third is the recovery phase. There will be a lot of time for people to look with hindsight at the lead up to this outbreak and the trade policy decisions that have made an impact on our preparedness. But one thing I'd like to mention is for the past 2 years, the Section 301 tariffs on medical products from China have hampered our preparedness. So the heightened tariffs of 10 to 25% on almost $5 billion of medical exports from China, totaling about 26% of all U.S. healthcare imports, really caused a decrease in our preparedness. And there were warnings of that in advance when there were testimonies at the Section 301 hearings from the healthcare community saying it takes 2 years to shift supply chains. So from 2018 to 2020, that's what we've seen a lag. But that's in the past. Where we're at right now is stage 2. We're in an active global pandemic. And what trade policy needs to do now is to allow and facilitate medical professionals and hospitals to have access to medical supplies at the highest quality, at the lowest cost, and of course, as quickly as possible. And that means from wherever they can be sourced, including China. So several weeks ago, USTR did exempt medical items from China from the 301 tariffs, and they did subsequent exemptions. So that's good. I think it also is a signal or a sign that those tariffs shouldn't have been put in place in the first instance. And we would argue that it still isn't enough, that Chinese exporters are going to face multiple demands from around the world. So if there's only a temporary exemption, they could very well prioritize the needs of other countries and other buyers in other countries. It is great to hear that FDA is also working with importers on giving more instructions or clarifications about what personal protective equipment needs their approval. Exim Bank is doing extensions for customer payments. They allowed or announced that yesterday. So there's good things going on there. And then the third phase of trade policy and the pandemic will be the recovery. And of course, we can talk a lot about that later, but I think there's a lot of ways we can use trade policy as an economic boost. So I'll stop there and turn it over to you, Stephen.
Great. Thank you so much, Christine. You highlighted a couple really important points, specifically USTR's exemption for medical supplies right now. It's going to be very important to us as we're seeing that China's recovering from their own epidemic issues that started in Wuhan a while ago, and now they have excess capacity. So we've been contacted by a lot of our partners over in China saying they want to help, they want to send us the medical equipment and supply back to the United States. And as the gateway for international trade in Los Angeles, this becomes very important to us because a lot of these goods will be coming either through our airport or our port. Speaking of which, the Port of Los Angeles is the busiest container port in North America, not just the United States, but North America, playing one of the most important roles for international trade for the entire nation. And during this important time, we're all looking and we're hearing a lot of different things that's happening around the port. So it's fantastic that we have Marisela Carabello here with us to share some of her thoughts in terms of some of the status that are happening around the port as well. Having over 2 decades of experience in public policies and legislative advocacy, as well as international relations with international governments, we're thrilled to have her perspective. Marisela, would love to hear from you in terms of what's happening around the ports. Some status and some update would be fantastic.
Great, thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Stephen, and hello, Christine, and everyone listening, and thanks to the Los Angeles World Affairs Council and the World Trade Center Los Angeles for conducting this important town hall. Our first and most important message from the Port of Los Angeles is that we are open for business. Ports are essential to keeping the supply chain moving. As America's port, the Port of Los Angeles is the largest container port in the Western Hemisphere, just like Stephen mentioned. Last year alone, we moved over 9.3 million TEUs. Those are 20-foot equivalent unit container units. All of our marine terminals are open. Ships are arriving. Longshore labor is at work. The trucking community, the railroads, the distribution center, everyone's at work. We are committed to keeping the supply chain running through this crisis. From the goods that need to get to the consumers, to the parts that are going to the United States manufacturing industry, to the medical supplies that need to get into the hands of our medical experts, the hospitals, the care facility, that's job number one for us.
Okay, great. With that, let's jump right into some of the questions that I think we've been wanting to get a bit more information. So first, Marisela, can you give us a bit of an update in terms of what's been happening in terms of port volume? We know that Port of Los Angeles is one of the largest economic drivers for the entire region. It's creating hundreds of thousands of jobs through direct and indirect effect. So as we're hearing about the slowdown in China, their capacity over the past few months, combined with the trade tariff issues that were happening before, has there been a decrease in the volume coming through the Port of Los Angeles that you've seen?
Great question, Stephen. Yes, we are experiencing, what we are experiencing is the pendulum effect, since the port has had 41 canceled ship sailings between February and April 1st. That represents about 26% of our normal vessel calls during this time frame. That is the 22% drop in overall volumes when we compare February 2019 to February of this year, 2020. We are also seeing significantly lower volumes in March. We are estimating a total decrease over our first quarter, and we are moving about 80 to 85% of our normal cargo volume. As we all know, Chinese production capacity was impacted by the spread of the coronavirus. As their public health crisis abates, production is returning. The Chinese manufacturing community has not ramped up to anywhere near capacity. They are probably at about 50% of normal production capacity based on our estimates. Our executive director, Gene Soroka, has very good contacts all throughout Asia, and he is keeping his ears to the ground. He's working his contacts, and he's getting the information directly for us so we can have the most updated information throughout. We also have a lot of cargo coming from China. Most of you know that's about 55% of our cargo. But additionally, we have a full book of business in Southeast Asia as well. Cargo moving from Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia is going full tilt right now. Beginning the second part of April, we will likely see a 10% uptick in freight moving through the Port of LA based on our forecast that we have right now. There has been a lot of inventory in the country, and those inventories have been used to keep supply chains flowing. Now we're going to begin replenishing those through the process, and we expect to start seeing the activity towards the back half of April. We need to evacuate the empty containers that are beginning to stack up at the port and find all the distressed exports. This is important because we need to have the empty containers prepared for when China's manufacturing community starts to ramp back up. The shipping lines have answered the calls of the industry to move out these empty containers, and the port will be welcoming 3 of the largest shipping vessels carrying 23,000 TEUs. The first vessel will arrive on March 31st at the Port of LA. We need to be prepared to catch this first big wave of imports, which are going to be replenishment inventories for our distribution networks. Then we're going to have to make that swing back and forth probably 2 more times before we get to August. August is traditionally the beginning of our peak season. So at that time, we will begin to see that definition, what that really means like. We have a lot of work ahead of us.
That's fantastic to hear that we're going to be receiving our first major shipment in March 31st. As we probably have seen over in the grocery stores and our CVS and Walgreens, the supplies are really dwindling. So this is definitely good news for us. Christine, as the mayor has issued the Safer at Home initiative, and now more and more business are basically starting to transition to working from home, and we're seeing a lot of impact as well to the economy. Can you talk a little bit about what you're hearing on the ground right now at the mayor's office in terms of impact, and will we be ready
when these big shipments start coming from China as we're replenishing our supplies?
Yeah, I think maybe the first thing to clarify about the supply chains in the grocery stores is that there's really no disruption to the grocery store supply chains. A lot of our food and paper products are sourced domestically. The issue is just the restocking. So there's plenty of food, plenty of paper supplies. The LA economy has been very strong. The LA County contributes more to the US GDP than any other single county in the country. And our metropolitan economy is, our GDP is over $1 trillion. So the third largest metropolitan economy in the world after New York and Tokyo. We've been having very low unemployment. We've been outperforming all other large cities in America. LA has really had this, been riding this economic boom. And I think that makes the current situation feel that much more drastic. It's almost like you're hitting a wall when you're going 60 and you didn't even touch the brake. But I think that that economic boom that we have been experiencing has prepared us well in terms of our city budget. We have strong reserves, and the LA economy is so diverse. We're not a one industry town or one shop town. We have services, manufacturing, trade, tourism, film, tech, mobility, esports, fintech, so many great sectors, and I think that's going to work to our advantage. As people are staying home, some industries are going to experience growth opportunities. Esports is one of them, with mobile gaming, video conferencing apps, delivery and logistics. Amazon is hiring 100,000 people nationwide, and Instacart just announced that they're going to hire 300,000 people across North America over the next 3 months. Food supply and retail is also booming, as is healthcare and medical, of course. So I think we're going to see some of these industries that are doing well, some of these businesses that are doing well, stepping up. And we saw that yesterday. The mayor announced that Riot Games, the gaming company that's located here in LA, is going to be donating $800,000 to local nonprofits, including to the COVID crisis fund. Another thing we're seeing is some pivoting of businesses in LA. We're the largest manufacturing hub in the United States. So textile manufacturers are starting to make masks and other personal protective equipment, gowns, boot covers. Breweries like Anheuser-Busch, they're making hand sanitizer. So Anheuser-Busch, their Van Nuys plant, is starting to make hand sanitizer. And elsewhere in the nation, Ford is partnering with GE and 3M to make ventilators, respirators, and face shields. Even at the city employees, we're being repurposed. So as a disaster service worker, I've been picking up the line, the help desk line, and helping folks from all across the city throughout the crisis. So we're all pivoting, and I think that's one of the great strengths of Los Angeles, is that we are nimble, we're very resilient, and people are really stepping up. So I think that is an optimistic sign.
That's fantastic to hear about the retooling of our manufacturing to be able to make other products. And thank you for stepping up to take on the hotline. It's a very important time. I'm sure a lot of folks are eager to get more answers. As we're moving forward with kind of dealing with the medical crisis, we've been hearing a lot, and we've been anticipating additional capacity, including the USS Mercy Naval Hospital that will be docked at the Port of Los Angeles. That's great news for us, because we all know that the medical capacity could be a challenge for us in the future. Marisela, can you talk a little bit about what's happening at the port as we're getting ready for the USS Mercy?
Sure. And I just want to address one thing from our last question, Stephen. When I was talking about the 23,000 TEU vessels that is coming to the Port of LA, March 31st being the first one, those ships are coming just to pick up empty containers. So it's not bringing in 23,000 TEUs of new items. It's just to help us relieve those empty containers. So getting back to your question, with regards to the USS Mercy Hospital. The Port of Los Angeles stands ready to partner with the Navy and the federal government as it prepares to bring in the USS Mercy to the Port of LA. As we all have been hearing, the USS Mercy is a 1,000-bed hospital, will treat only non-COVID-19 patients to assist the local hospitals overloaded with COVID-19 patients. And at the end of the day, it's the welfare of our residents that's a top priority during this public crisis. In addition, we've been working with our federal partners in the arrivals. We are responding to the emergency orders at the state that the ports are an essential infrastructure, and just as important, the broader supply chain is considered essential business. The governor, the mayor, and others have specifically stated that the supply chains need to keep moving, and we take our essential role in this crisis very seriously.
Great, thank you for that update. I think there's a lot of questions out there. Speaking of which, we want to make sure that this is an interactive session, and Kim earlier mentioned that there are participants right now that have been sending in questions. So I'm going to pass this over to Jessica from the World Affairs Council Town Hall to help us moderate some of these questions that are coming in. Jessica?
Great, thank you. Yes, we're getting a lot of questions in, so I will try to get to as many of these as possible. One thing, I think, Christine, this would be for you, is where are there any quick links, phone numbers, or areas where entrepreneurs and businesses who want to help out, if they want to export their medical supplies or even offer to hire people, where would you direct those companies?
Yeah, if you go to if you go to coronaviruslacity.org, you'll see the email address for the mayor's help desk. You can send an email there. That's we're getting through everything as quickly as possible. You may, if it's an offer for a donation or a sale, you'll probably get a response from me personally. And then we are coordinating with our Emergency Operations Center. Within the Emergency Operations Center, there's a Business Operations Center that is collecting all the leads and having them ready to go when we have a city supply need. And then we're also coordinating with the private sector through our Mayor's Office of Economic Development. So that's been a really helpful way to coordinate all the various, and we have gotten quite a lot of leads and offers of assistance.
Wonderful. And this would be for Marisela. So how is the LA Port making sure that materials coming in are virus-free? And also, do the port workers have protective equipment so that they are staying safe?
Sure, very important question. So the port, specifically our executive director, has been working very closely, Mr. Gene Soroka, very closely with the Longshore Labor Union, the ILWU, and with PMA to make sure that our terminal are safe. Also working with the city of Los Angeles, working through the mayor's office and DWP, over 40,000 gallons of sanitizing fluid is being distributed to our workforce on our terminals. Our own construction and maintenance division with our hazmat teams are putting together the supplies in 35-ounce spray bottles so all our workers can continue to spray the equipment and make sure it's staying safe out there on the docks.
Great. Christine, back to you. You mentioned that the mayor's office is encouraging international collaboration. What form is that taking?
Well, we have open lines of communication with several, about 15 global cities that are the Deputy Mayor of International Affairs is leading. So they're exchanging best practices, things that are working in their cities in terms of responding to the outbreak, and those are cities from Europe, Asia, Latin America, all over. So that's one way that from the mayor's office that we're continuing to collaborate internationally. I think it's important for everyone in whatever line of work they're doing to continue to reach out to their international partners, letting them know that we're still here. We're open for business. We're going to get through things together. And it's also a great time to plan as much as you can, planning ahead for how to bounce back once the pandemic is behind us, which it will be. We have to remember that.
All right, thank you. Next question is, relative to other drivers for economic recovery, how much will be attributed to international trade? Will certain regions be more important for recovery than others? For example, North American trade versus Asia?
That's a really good question, and I'd be interested in Stephen's views on that too. But I would say after the 2008 recession, or even during the recession, one of the big economic strategies was to increase exports, especially from small business. And that's also something that even before the pandemic, we were focusing on. And there's new resources from the state of California, into rolling out resources, webinars, export training, and coordinating resources across the state. So I think that's even going to be more important in terms of accessing international opportunities as part of an economic recovery plan.
I would agree with that assessment completely. I think if you look back at a previous incident, which is the 2002-2003 SARS epidemic in Hong Kong, we learned a lot from our international partners when we saw that they had to adjust their business model very quickly afterwards. And so I think during this particular crisis that we're facing right now, we're seeing that e-commerce is going to be a major potential recovery strategy that a lot of people are looking at. A lot of our local domestic companies who traditionally relied on a local supply chain and also a local consumer base are now seeing that you can't depend on just one source. You really have to diversify not only your supply chain, but also your customers as well. So I think in the future, we're going to see a lot more potential opportunities for international trade utilizing e-commerce platforms.
Thank you. Marisela, I think this one is for you. From the perspective of port operations, if you consider port movements as a broader economic indicator, to what extent do you see supply chains moving away from China towards a more diverse Southeast Asia supply chain base?
Well, China is about 55% of the imports that come in through the Port of Los Angeles. They are our #1 trading partner, but followed very closely by our other trading partners, Japan, Korea, Vietnam. And we're also looking at our full book of business, which includes Southeast Asia. We're looking at Malaysia, Indonesia. They're also providing goods coming into this country.
Thank you. How will the drag on foreign direct investment have a wider impact on the region regarding real estate, finance, and the technology sectors? Stephen, you might have some insight on that one too.
Yeah, we saw over the last, prior to 2020, over the last few years, there's been an influx of investment coming from around the world to Los Angeles to really help us after the recession here in Los Angeles. And if you look at not just downtown, but throughout the entire region, you saw a lot of new real estate development that are really supported by foreign direct investment. And a lot of that came from China. In fact, in 2016, the Rhodium Group did a report that quantified about $16 billion of investment coming directly from China in just 1 year for California. And 2 years later, after the capital flow restriction order coming from the Chinese government, in 2 years, in 2018, that number dropped to $330 million. So that's a big drop for us. And we saw that some of the real estate projects stalled and we're not able to do as much. So I think moving forward, looking at this, I think the world will be looking for new opportunities. I think during, as you see the volatility in our stock market, it's really creating a lot of uncertainty. But once we get to the recovery phase, I think people are going to continue to see, as Christine earlier mentioned, that Los Angeles has a very diverse economy with many different sectors. So talking about diversification, they can invest in this region and they will continue to look to Los Angeles as a key destination. The most important thing for us is basically to get through this really challenging period. And again, following and heeding Christine and the mayor's recommendation, we really need to do our part to stay at home to make sure that we flatten the curve and not continue to escalate and elevate the pressure that's on our medical system right now.
Yeah, good follow-up to that one, what you just mentioned, Stephen. To Christine, what have some of the most helpful tips that other countries have been providing been to the mayor's office?
Oh boy, that's a good question. I think you know, we've been looking at what Italy has been doing, what China has done, Korea testing. I mean, part of it is, you know, I'm not entirely, I haven't been looped into all of those conversations, so I don't know the exact things, but I think focusing on tenants, and that's been something that Italy has done and that we have done as well. The drive-through testing that Korea has done, we've as of a few days ago have created testing centers that the city is doing that are drive-up testing centers for the most vulnerable or the most high risk. So those are a couple of the things, but I'll have to think about that some more.
If I can jump in there a little bit as well, I think we've learned quite a lot from our partners over in Korea and also in Taiwan. They're aggressive and very clear communication about directives in terms of what needs to happen, and so that you don't have false information, you don't have rumors, and you don't have fears driving action and decision. That's going to be very important, and that's why I think with Mayor Garcetti leading the way, along with our county supervisors and other major city mayors around the entire region. As you know, LA is the LA County region has 10.2 million people, but we also have 88 different cities and over 100 incorporated regions. All these elected officials are coordinating together. The Safer at Home initiative was launched in partnership with the county, with the cities. And so this is really an important thing that we learn internationally, that you can't have different messaging. You have to have a coordinated effort to move forward, because we can't get through this alone. The borders are, a lot of people don't even know when they're driving from one city to the next. So, you know, when it comes to viruses and disease, there are no restrictions there. So I think that's one of the huge lessons that we learned from our partners, from whether it's from Iran or from again, Korea and Taiwan. It's been very well heeded, the lessons.
Yeah, that's a good point. And for this next question, because of the issues with communication, making sure we're getting accurate information, major American news outlets have been expelled from China. And the question is there a concern about the reliability of information about economic and public health conditions in the coming days and months? And are you hearing anything from your contacts on the ground in China regarding this issue?
I'll jump in as well for this one, if you don't mind. So just to clarify, Jessica, the question is basically, is it our news media, or is it concerned about China, what's happening in China?
I think the question was about our American outlets being expelled from China. And so the concern about, is the information that we're getting from the mainland, is it going to be information that's reliable if we don't have journalists on the ground who can verify?
Sure. I think this is an ongoing issue when it comes to international relations as well, and whether we can trust the information source that's coming directly just from a state-sponsored media outlet. I guess the short answer is no. We would definitely like to have more free press and to be able to get information from various sources as well. But at this point, you know, I think it's not so much about the information source that's coming from China, whether it's reliable or not. Right now, we really need to start looking at how do we work closer together to build up a system that, moving into the next step, moving into recovery phase, how do we not get to this point where we're not trusting the information? So it's really a good chance for us to evaluate how do we get here. And that's why Christine's earlier point in terms of all the trade policies, we didn't get here out of nowhere. It's based on some of the decisions that are made in the past. So I think at this point, we really need to start self-evaluating as well and moving forward in the recovery phase, how do we work closer with our partners in China to make sure we don't get to this place again where we're not trusting the information that's coming from each other.
And I'll just jump in for a moment and just add that our executive director, June Soroka, lived in Asia for a good part of his career, and he has his ears to the ground and working his contacts not only in China but throughout Southeast Asia on information. So the port has been getting information. We haven't heard anything about, or at least I haven't heard anything about the journalists being thrown out of China, but I will follow up with our executive director on that item.
Great. One question that's a bit industry specific is, I think this is from Marisela. This gentleman works in the construction industry, and he is wondering if you anticipate shipment quarantines in the near to medium future. He'd like to know about any issues that could affect normal construction scheduling.
We haven't heard about any quarantines of any construction materials. Our understanding is that construction is considered an essential part of keeping the economy going and an essential workplace. So like the construction that's taking place here at the Port of LA, all those projects are ongoing as we speak today. Those have not been shut down. So I don't have the crystal ball in front of me of what's going to happen to future supplies, but I can only address to what we're dealing with today.
Great. And I think this will be our last question. This question is for both Christine and Stephen. You've spoken on lessons learned from our friends to the Southeast, but what about our partners in North America? Is LA City County working with Canada and or Mexico to make sure regional trade, bolstered by the recently ratified USMCA, doesn't take a major hit? Is the mayor's office working with Canadian officials based locally and internationally to flatten the curve of this pandemic? And like I said, that will be the final question.
Sure. We have been working with all the consulates, including the Canadian and Mexican consulates. In fact, the Mexican consulate was one of those that were very helpful in providing potential suppliers of medical supplies for us. So, there's a lot of talk about the curve and where everyone is on the curve. Mexico is, I guess, in some ways behind us by several weeks. So there was Mexico in addressing the pandemic before us right now could be a really helpful supplier of personal protective equipment and other supplies. So and then going forward, North America is absolutely a focus of the mayor and of our office. There's a North American Mayor's Summit that was planning to meet and had its first meeting last June. So the mayors across the region are really honed in on strengthening ties across the cities in our countries as well as our countries. And USMCA, I believe, is scheduled to go into effect in June. So that could be a helpful piece of trade facilitation for the region.
And from our side, we've been communicating with our partners over Mexico as well as Canada in terms of issues regarding just business development and business in general. The consulates, both consulates have been very helpful as well in terms of getting the message out to the local communities here. As you can imagine, Los Angeles has one of the largest Mexican populations outside of Mexico. And so some of the traditional news media information might not be getting out to that population. So in coordination with the Mexican consul generals and the governments, they're able to get some of the information out to this population that's living here, which is very important, as well as our Canadian partners as well. So that's one keynote to highlight. I think moving forward, when it comes to recovery, this is the part where, to Christine's point, with USMCA coming into effect soon, it will really be potentially beneficial for us. And I think we're all hoping to start looking at the positive side of things, that we can get over this hump so we can start looking at the recovery phase. And at that point, our international partners will become more important than ever before, because I think we're all going to be really start dealing with some of the aftermath that we haven't even anticipated yet. So I think these conversations are definitely very important for us to continue to build on those relationships that we've already spent decades building before.